there's nothing you can do or say. And no, for me, it was the positive aspect of resilience. It's like, I will bounce back, irregardless of the situations I'm in. And I learned to make the best of out of every situation. So for you, what do you think was in the education, of course, it was amazing.
I will still have to disagree with you and say I will not mention the positive.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe it's also because of how I think of boarding schools. I really think of boarding schools as colonial legacies. So asking me to say something positive.
We're going to unpack that. Do not even get there yet.
But point is, if you ask me to say the positive aspects of boarding school, to me, it's almost asking me, can I mention positive aspects of
prison
being colonized? I will not. I don't have them. I think that the only thing that comes out is learning survival mechanisms. But if this thing in itself had not existed, I wouldn't have had to essentially go through it. So I don't think I want to go into like this is positive or whatever. The only thing I can say or can really give is justification as to why people end up in boarding schools.
I see.
I feel like maybe those justifications can sound positive, but they will still be grounded in survival mechanisms.
Yes, coping. Oh my, no, what? Actually, that is such a fresh take for me. Actually, the funniest part is you equating boarding school to a colonial structure. But that's such a unique take. Like, you just justify the reasons. For many of us, I think, Sonia, you'll agree with me on this, boarding school was more than a place we went to attain education, to, learn so many things. Boarding school was a place where most of us spent our most, formative years of our life. It's also a place where we built friendships. It's a place where we learned routines, where we navigated authority, and even where we developed habits that most of us have taken into even later on our adulthood. Now, it was also a place you really learned that a loaf of bread could be done in, 5 minutes. But that's a topic for another day. So welcome back to Igitekerezo podcast. And today I am joined by the one and only Sonia Karita for an honest conversation on our boarding school experiences, what they gave us, what they demanded from us, and also how they have shaped us into the people today you're seeing, we've become. So Sonia, thank you so much for joining us today. It's very lovely to have you here. And I think to, set the mood, I don't know if it's going to set the mood for you or trigger something, but kindly take me back to the day you learned that, I'm actually packing my bags and I'm going to boarding school. What were you feeling? Some people, I feel, they tell me I resented my parents from that day, So take me back to the Sonia learning that, you're going to boarding school.
The very first day?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the very first day, I don't think I felt as negative about it because I also feel like I had a reality painted for me that was not real.
How old were you?
I was 11. 11, but I think I imagined boarding school as just a place to now be permanently with my friends. And I was like, this is going to be so much fun.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'll get to see like my parents, yes, from time to time. But I was like, I think this is going to be great. Now, instead of like just like going home and then like seeing my friends another day, I'm like, no, I'm going to be living with my friends.
Ooh.
So to me, it felt like it was probably, I don't know why in my head I was like, this is probably going to be like some sort of like camp, but like a fun one, vacation.
Rainbows and sunshine.
Yes, 100%.
When did that bubble?
It burst the very first day. The very first day that we arrived. I feel like the very first day, one of the first things that I remembered already that was odd is like getting there and the first things that they do is like fully search you. And I guess again,
TSA.
I was,
Yeah,
I'm like, open your suitcases, open your bags. What do you have in here? This you can bring in, this you cannot bring in.
Yeah.
Also, the boarding school that I was going to was led by nuns. So it's already like, okay, this top cannot enter, this skirt cannot enter, or I don't know, just different ranges of products at times that they would be like, this is, you cannot have this in.
Yeah.
So I was already feeling confused because I'm like, this is supposed to be fun, but I'm already sensing, I'm already sensing the authority as soon as I arrive in here.
Yeah.
And I think I lost it when we got to the dining hall.
Did you? Because I feel like most of us that grew up on Disney, you've watched High School Musical. I think did you have that? Was it East High, the school that was used in the movie? Was
don't
that the
remember,
version
but I know
you had?
kind of a little bit, you know,
backpacks, lockers, common dining area,
amazing food. I'm like, this is gonna be so much fun. Like, yes, we'll be in school, but also not really. I almost felt like the studies would be like, I don't know, a little addition, a little something on the side.
But you went for vibes and then education later.
That is what it felt like in my head, genuinely. Yeah. And I think also because I knew some of my friends who I had gone to like in primary school with, and I was like, my God, even my friends are gonna be there. Like, this is not even a space I will step in being confused. I'll just be with like a couple of my friends from school. Yeah. So I was excited, but yeah.
So what exactly, because you said your bubble kind of broke the moment you set foot in like the dining hall. What was there? The dining hall? Walk us through the menu of the day.
Menu? There is no menu. There's no such thing as a menu. Yeah. I think my first shock was seeing food in a basin. I genuinely...
You're joking. You were served in a basin, or it was served firm?
I guess, like, we sat on a table as maybe a group of, like, 10 people or so, right? And I think at night, it was basically posho and beans. But then the posho was, like, in a basin. It was just a blue basin, and it had it inside. And I was just like...
How do you serve?
Why is a basin on the table? I'm already confused, but also I'm looking now at the beans. I'm seeing little insects.
Yeah, they were called bean worms? No.
I don't know what they call them in English. Yeah. But to me,
weavers.
That was...
Actually, they were called bean weavers. Yeah, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm seeing them in. I'm like, there is no way this is what we're eating. This is not the reality I was promised. I don't think I did not eat that night. I did not.
Really?
I almost felt like at that point I felt abandoned. I was like, there is no way this is what you're leaving me to deal with. Yeah. And I think I had already sensed also the negativity of the authority around, that I was like, this is not what I thought. But again, this is the mind of an 11-year-old. There was no way I would have predicted that reality.
Yeah.
But on the very first day, I think I had definitely my bubble was burst open. But also beyond that, I remember also entering and they were like, oh, your hair is too much. It was already shaved, honestly, to a very low level. But then they were like, nope, you'll have to go back and shave again.
And I think at that point,
you know.
Yeah.
But I think at that point, I also had just shaved after, like, honestly, I was very attached to my hair. So, like, going further down, I was like, I don't know what you want from me at this point. So, no, I had my bubble burst the very first day.
The very first day. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what about you? What was your experience on your first day?
First of all, there was a thing going around on Twitter where it was like, what's the stage where you like your earliest memory, right? And for me, I went to boarding school when I was 5. Where's my sympathy? 5, and I don't think I really, even now, I don't think I can comprehend up to date, like, first of all, what that means for me as an adult right now, but even what it meant for me at that stage. So I think I vaguely remember my parents. I remember it was a van. It was a van, and they dropped me off in the dorms, and then they were like, oh, Epi, look at the airplane. And then next thing I know, henceforth, my abandonment issues, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, for me, I don't think I really critically like remember my exact experience. Now, Sonia, that leads me, I know.
You were 5. I don't think I'd expect you to remember a lot at 5.
I'm really fine. But so Sonia, actually, why this is even a conversation right now is how it even came about. I was having lunch with my coworkers and it randomly just came up. I don't remember what the context was. But then all of a sudden, everyone was sharing the experiences. And then I realized that out of 5 people I meet on a daily, at least youth, 3 of them have gone to boarding school, you know? And that leads me to ask, what's something that something we accepted as normal in boarding school that sounds completely ridiculous? For example, I will say I went to boarding school when I was 5, and people are like, and then where I studied from, there were so many young people like me, you know, children that were in boarding school. And then for you, do you have that experience? Whereas when you say it out loud, someone is like, you're joking, you're actually lying. And it was considered normal.
Okay, would that be someone who has not been in boarding school, like getting to hear that, or like someone who's been in boarding school and still thinks?
I think you can give us both. Yeah.
Because I feel like people who have been in boarding school are so used to normalizing their experience that it doesn't really come out to sound odd. I also feel like even you saying like, oh, okay, like being 5 and like heading into boarding school, I think the only reason it doesn't sound normal is because the average Rwandan did not go to boarding school at 5.
Yeah.
But if you tell somebody else like, oh, I was in boarding school at 11 and they have never, and they're like outside of like this like Rwandan context, it is going to sound insane because it's like, why would you be separated from your parents at such a critical age? Like that is literally preteen. Yeah. So there's always that. I think there's definitely a difference between.
So have you had that experience?
Absolutely.
Like which one?
In relation to like
was it the Benson? Like I want an experience that happened and you're just like, what was that? That was insane.
I think the punishments, the
corporal punishments.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like to me, say for example, telling like my friends from college who had never had that experience and also their idea of like boarding school, at least because I was based in the US, is like, oh, like a private, it's like bougie, all of that. But then actually talking about it and like its reality kind of starts to sound crazy to them because I'm like, oh, we did not really have showers. We were just showering outside. Oh, like if I took too long to get ready and like didn't make it to class in time, I probably would have had to like mop an entire dorm as a punishment. But I'm 12. I'm 12. It doesn't make sense to make a 12-year-old do that, especially over something so small. And also like they're still at an age where they're trying to even form and build habits. So I think that's like an example I could give.
Oh, okay. And actually, now let's go into because I think for me, every time I hear about boarding school, it's more on the negative aspect. So can you share like experiences for you that, well, I want the good ones first, and then you can also, there's probably a parent watching this and they're like, I'm indecisive, like, should I take them to our boarding school? I don't know. Minus the semantics, what's online. For you, what were the good and what were also the bad?
What were the good experiences?
Yeah. Sigh.
I feel like I'm going to have a hard time with this one.
Okay, let's start with the bad.
With the bad of so many. I feel like I'd have a very hard time recollecting what was good because I feel like the bad for me has always overshadowed. But one, the authority figures. I felt like I was in a boarding school led by nuns.
Yeah.
I think that, this may be a controversial take. I don't think that nuns should ever be allowed to be in education spaces.
Yeah.
A lot of them, I think, have... it's almost like a negativity that comes to being around children. I don't know if it's like from essentially them not being allowed to have kids through, I guess, like their like religious decisions. But I feel like placing them, I think, in the care of like really young kids when they usually have sometimes that resentment kind of makes them essentially like put out all their anger onto kids. I think a lot of times unnecessarily. I think one of the things that I remember was when I think it was my first year in boarding school.
Yeah.
I remember I made a mistake of calling a nun. Now, like, especially in French, like we were used to, for example, say madame, and madame kind of translates to Mrs.
Oh.
But now I use that instead of essentially like saying like miss, but then it became a very big deal. I was literally screamed, shouted at, but it was a word I'd used throughout primary school to refer to my teachers instead of like saying essentially
Yeah.
whatever, maîtresse. And I feel like that kind of like anger being put out onto a child
Yes.
definitely should have never been the case. And I'd seen essentially it's like this one nun do this on so many several occasions, like always turning something really small into a huge situation and like taking
Making
out their
an
anger
anthill.
on kids.
Yeah.
That to me is one of the negative experiences. I feel like maybe if I was to say positive, maybe it would be still again hard. I really have to think about it a little bit.
I think in the meantime, maybe I can also.
But you can also tell me, maybe I can see what the positive could be.
Positive, let me also take the road you took. And I think for me, I think even before we shot this, I was telling you, it felt like another yet episode for me to shoot. And it wasn't until I think I remember I was scrolling at night and I was like, okay, let me see if this is a topic that's been brought up, let's say on podcasts, on social media. And I'm looking it up and it triggered me. It triggered me to heights where I was just like, okay, you know what? I don't think this is, am I sure I want to do this? And I think for me, it was more psychological for me because, for example, you talked about the punishments, the corporal punishments, because I remember there was this one time, there's this girl we were studying with, it was insubordination. They used to term it as that to our prefect. And she was made, they told her to polish. Like, we used to call it polishing. Like, you put red on the, is it pavements, the verandas? And she did that for the whole school. For like a month. I remember she was...
Oh my God.
By the time she was done, she had lost, I think like, I don't even know, 10 kgs. Like, it was so noticeable. And I just remember asking myself, was it that deep?
But also, what had they done is now what I'm curious about. Do you
Apparently, she had disrespected. They used to call it insubordination. She had maybe talked back to her prefect, or I think the prefect had passed some instructions, and she refused to do that. And they were like, "Okay, you're going to be an example to the rest," you know. And then I felt like there was some sort of like psychological warfare, but they used to use it under the guise of, "Oh, we're teaching you discipline," you know. It's like, when you make these proper lines, they used to say this thing of, "You'll thank me later," or they would use things like, "Oh, spare the rod and spoil the child." So we're gonna whoop you, and you're gonna thank me in 25. You know, 25. And I remember this one time I was in a classroom and I had submitted my book. It didn't have a cover, and I am seated in like a science class, and I remember they were giving us our exam sheets back. I remember this vividly. I had a 93. I was in primary 3. And then I had just submitted my English book. And then this lady storms in. The English teacher storms in. Because it wasn't covered. She comes to my desk. While the other one is passing out papers. Whoops me. Like, to the point where the person seated next to me. Because I think I had reached a point where I'm just like, okay, just another day. Just another whooping, you know. And then this person broke down. And then this lady looked at me. She's like, "You'll thank me. You'll thank me in 25 years. I know you look for," I don't even remember her name. So I think for me, it was more of like on the psychological aspect. And then there was always the authority aspect where there was like an imbalance between like the students and the staff, where it was like, "I know better. You don't know." I think for me, I felt everything after years after I left, where I would find myself in situations where I'm like, I can't decide unless someone is telling me. Like, I need someone else to decide for me. You know, there's this thing where they say, "Oh, when you take a child to boarding school, they become more independent." I think for me, it was the opposite. You become hyper independent on systems. Now, when those systems are taken away from you, you're just like, what am I supposed to do? Because I remember if I've gone to boarding school when I was 5, there was authority over my life. Pretty much, you don't trust your decisions, you know. Yes. So I reach uni and I am trying to, you know, I'm like, I need to read, but I feel like I need someone to.
I hear you. I really do hear you.
Yeah. So I think for me, that was the, and also there's this kind of escapism I developed. I think it's something I noticed even with people I went to school with at the time, you kind of like, have you heard of that psychological, is it called maladaptive daydreaming? Where it's just like, you always wait,
Yes.
you even lose your childhood because you're like, I cannot wait to leave this place. And then 25 years later, you're just like, so for me, I was always in that constant state of like, oh my days, I'm daydreaming. I'm like, right now I'm in Hawaii. So you disassociate from your environment. I'm telling you, half the time, you're zoned out.
Yeah.
There could be a fire right now and I'm just like, I'll be fine.
It is crazy.
You know what? Don't disrupt my mental flow right now. I'm in Hawaii and you're kind of disrupting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me it was more psychological. So
I think that was there for me in a lot of ways too.
Yeah.
Because I remember one of the things that we would like tell each other, especially at night, would be like,
yeah,
God, I hope you dream of not being here. And we would wake up and be like, oh my God, like I dreamt that I was home. And it would be like really basic things. I'd be like, oh, I dreamt that I was home. I was having breakfast. Like the most mundane things that you'd be doing on a day-to-day. It is not something that is like extraordinary. It's just, I am literally dreaming of being out of this place.
Yes.
And to me, that is when I feel like when I was looking back at it, I was like, oh, this really did feel like a sort of prison for me. And the only way to escape it was on a mental level. The maladaptive daydreaming,
it's
100%,
real.
it's very real. And to me, it was definitely a coping mechanism for me. And it worked because I was like, if I absorb myself in this reality, I will not survive it. So there was only two ways that I was doing that. Either by maladaptive daydreaming or I think I had to, at some point, I think I became numb. And that's when I also realized, when I looked back, I was like, oh, I think I always deal with like intense situations by numbing myself off of them. And I think it absolutely started with like boarding school, because I remember like the first couple terms.
Yeah.
I just remember like kids always randomly crying in class. Like, oh, like they're really going through it. Like I miss home. I can't do this. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I was not really crying, but I wasn't happy either. I wasn't sad. I was just there and I was like, I can't feel.
Burnout from
I don't want to
edge.
feel. And I think I adapted to not feeling as a way to get through. So I was, I remember even like the first time that my parents visited me, I think they noticed that I'd lost a lot of weight within like a month, but I was very unbothered. I was just like, I don't know.
Sorry to cut you short, but like, okay, so now what was making you feel that way?
What was making me feel like I want
feel
to
like
numb
you
myself?
needed to disassociate? Because, for example, I can give you an example. I see this, and the thing with I don't know if it's desensitizing, these language we've become familiar with on social platforms, where it's like, oh, I need therapy, or I'm a pathological liar, and it's like, because for me, I remember. I'm not claiming anything, but like it was also something I had to get out of, because you inadvertently become a pathological liar, because it's like you have to say what is right instead of what is true, because you're like, if I don't do this, I'm going to be in trouble. So when they ask me, were you making noise? No. I don't know, like there was that. It doesn't matter if it's true. I just need to say what's right so that I stay out of trouble. And then henceforth, you develop these patterns. So for you, like what made you numb? Like what was making you numb? Was it the students? Was it socially? Was it authority? What was making you feel like you needed to escape that reality?
I think that for me, one, being in boarding school is honestly, it felt like I just needed to adapt to some sort of survival mechanism. There was so much I think I wasn't used to. One, bullying. Bullying is a huge one, where I'm like, and I feel like it's not always necessarily like in the ways that like, physical. It's physical, whatever. No. I feel like there was literally students, especially like they're in upper classes, trying to impose on you a certain amount of fear on them instead of like, no, we're actually together in this. Yes. No, it's like, we have gone through it and we want to make it worse for you.
So what were they doing? Yeah.
What were they doing? Okay, so I feel like when I think I first went to boarding school, there was so much I didn't know how to do. Genuinely, I feel like I had to learn with time. But like, I did not know how to like properly say wash like towels and like whatever. And I feel like there was one mocking that, like, but like at the same time, you're like 11. So there was mocking. Other times, weirdly enough, one of the things that I remember, even outside of like the upper students, it would be like the class themselves, where it's like, oh, like they say, maybe they noticed like, oh, like I wasn't nice to this person, for example. Again, you're 11. I don't think you necessarily always have like the best social skills. So you're not always realizing that like maybe what you're doing is impact someone in any type of way.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I remember is like having a class meeting centered around you, and you would
intervention,
but then you're also being intervened by like people the same age as you. And I remember like being placed.
I went through that too. Yeah.
And you're like placed in a circle, and you're having like 30 students surrounding you, and each and every single one of those students is telling you things they don't like about you. I think
that's insane. This is Negroes.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I'm like, I don't even know, but I just remember like that, for example, can only instill in you like some sort of survival mechanism, because how can you deal with like 30 plus students telling you you're horrible for reasons A, B, C, D over like very small things that could have easily been dealt with like with an apology, instead of like, no, we are organizing a meeting and you have to be at the meeting. And you never knew that the meeting was about you until the meeting started. Everybody else was in on it. And then you you're finding yourself sitting down, and it's like, we need to have a discussion about Sonia. That even the toilets was crazy.
Remember how there would be anonymous cheats being passed around, where you'd find your name in like a toilet. They're like, Sonia is a thief. She's a liar. And it's like, what? It was really those small things that compound at yeah.
And so to me, I don't think that anybody at that age has the capacity to deal with the emotional damage that can do. So to me, the easiest way, again, it's not like you also realize it. It's just that I look back and I was like, oh, I did have to numb myself for me to survive this. Yes. But again, it moves away from the students themselves. It moves into the staff and how they talk to you, the amount of authority, how you had to be careful. You really had to be careful around every single thing that you do. Oh my God, I'm talking and I'm not supposed to be talking here. I'm out of line here. And if I'm out of line, I'll be punished for this. Oh, this is like, I'm supposed to do this task and finish it by 7:15. If it is 7:17 and it's finding me there, I will be punished. So
some would argue that was good. Some would argue. At the time, you can notice that anyways.
But I feel like constantly also having to find yourself, I don't know, like being careful around every single thing that you say and do can only instill, I think, in you a certain amount of fear that you can no longer deal with. So to me, my survival mechanism was, I think, being numb.
Were you caned? I don't know if that's whooped, I guess, informally.
In boarding school, I feel like ours was not so much around that. I feel like what they used to do, actually, sometimes I think is finding punishments that are shameful. Yes, and I genuinely felt like at times they were worse than the physicals. The physical were they were there, say kneel for this like amount of time. But say one punishment, you know, all those things. But like a punishment, say that I do remember that they would do at times would be say, you're late for class and you don't finish getting ready on time. I know that at times they would place like a student in their pajamas outside of the dorm, and now it became like, I don't know, you could be in your nightgown and you're essentially having to stand there, and the teachers will find you there, and everybody else in the school will see you there.
Did they give you a tag, like a card, like, oh, this is Sonia, I was sleeping?
No, but I feel like it wasn't that. I feel like you being in a nightgown in itself is the embarrassment.
Yeah.
But you're having to stand in a position where the whole school is noticing you and the staff, and you just had to stand there. And I felt like that and the shame that it already brings you, to me, was always much worse. I was like, I'd rather you beat me and get me out of here than like place me to be the center of like
all this negative attention. And I think there was also a school later on I went to, and I remember they used to shave their heads when they would speak ironically their mother tongue, you know. And then I remember for us it would be the sax. And I remember this one time my friends were sleeping in morning preps, and they're like, okay, since you love to sleep, mind you, you're awake by 4:45, you know. And you're like what, 10, 12, 13? They're like, okay, you're going to go for preps. They find you sleeping. I remember they got cardboards and then they put them on the walkway. They told them, go sleep there the whole day. And I'm looking back and I'm like, what was really going through your minds? Like, okay, now what? You know?
Yeah.
So, geez, I think it can all come back to the corporal punishments. And I think also, by the way, Sonia, sorry, this is going to be a very long one. There's a lot to unpack here. But I remember there was a conversation I was having with some friends of mine, and I was on the side of, I think someone shared a traumatic experience, something that people in their class did. And then I remember we were on the side of like, that was so mean. That was so, like, you deserve an apology. And then the other people were like, no, they didn't know any better. There's always that excuse of like, we were young. But like, I feel like, what do you think of that take? Because I think the bullying usually, I think even the negative experience is not only from the authority, but it was also from our own, you know? So what do you think of that? Do you think we were kids? Yes. Or you need to take accountability at the ripe age of 16?
I think the accountability to me is necessary because a lot of times people also get to a point where they realize that the things that they were doing were not right. I don't think I ever liked someone being like, I was a kid, but you were a kid and you did that though. And also now you're sitting in a space where you're realizing what you did. So what are you doing about it? I guess also because I think bullying is something that can really have a permanent like effect on somebody. Yes. So I'm like, I don't care when you take accountability. If you've gotten to the point where you realize what you've done, I think you can take accountability. Yeah. But also don't expect that somebody else will give you, like, will accept your, I don't know if it's like your apology or anything that you do, whichever actions that you take towards that. Because someone may still be sitting in that space where they're literally trying to still work on their self-esteem that you destroyed very early on, and they're just facing the consequences of that. I don't know, but I've noticed that at least in my friend groups, people, I don't know, sometimes I always say like adults are just kids walking. They
really are walking. Like, look at us,
you know? And I think that people can genuinely still reflect on the things that people have done to them, and they're like, I remember this person doing this to me at 10, at 11. And I'm like, if someone is still acknowledging and living through that reality through their memory, then you're absolutely responsible, I think, really to take accountability.
Exactly.
I'm like, sure, maybe you didn't know what you were doing or like who was influencing you to think that way. Especially when I think of prefects, because I do think that what the prefects were learning was absolutely coming from the authority figures and what they were teaching them to do. Yes. I don't necessarily think that comes from a child's mind, but you can actually work to influence someone to think that way. But once you move from a thought to a decision, even I think at a young age, there is a need for accountability.
Exactly. And I feel like there was a tech I saw one time. They were like, if childhood is such a fundamental, it's like your Roman Empire, I don't know if I can call it the Roman Empire, but like the arc on which it's such a fundamental aspect of our lives, yet it's very neglected. Yeah, anyways. So now, Sonia, now let's get to the tolerance aspect, because you already know that's like my number one person. I'm like, I went to boarding school when I was 5. Let's live the trauma, but and then I've met parents where they're like, oh my days, you're so independent. What do you think of that, of the tolerance aspect of like endurance? Actually, I remember there was a school I went to, and in our anthem there was perseverance, steer, and endurance. What do you think of those words? Because those are the main reasons parents say, I'm taking my child to boarding school because I need them to, if I'm out of this world, I need them to be able to survive in the coldest of conditions. What do you think about that?
I personally don't think it's necessary. I really don't agree with like putting kids through things that they're not capable of getting through and then trying to call it a lesson. I believe that we as humans are still capable of learning a lot of things outside of trauma. I don't think you need a traumatic event to teach you. I don't know. It's almost like, you need to be taught a lesson. But I'm like, okay, but like, what are the consequences of also going through that in that specific aspect? Because I feel like, say you're talking about the independence aspect. Now, even when you're talking about the dependency, I felt the exact same way. Yeah. I felt like once I was essentially allowed to do things as I pleased, like having that freedom, I was very confused with how to move around that. And I feel like the consequences of usually now being handed that amount of freedom randomly after like being in boarding school for such a long time, it can really backfire very negatively.
Yeah.
So I don't think I agree that people have to go through like, I don't know, traumatic events to be taught a lesson.
Yeah.
I think that life in itself is a lesson. I'm so sorry, but you will have the ups and downs. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you go through. You will learn to survive and to live in other ways that don't have to, I don't know, you don't need to be put through a pathway that is just going to be negative.
Yeah.
The negative experiences will come no matter what pathway you end up on. So I feel like purposefully putting someone through that is very harmful.
Cuckoo a bit. And I think they used to use slogans like, oh, a burnt child dreads fire, once bitten, twice shy. And I remember this so vividly. It's crazy. But Sonia, I think we've spent so much time talking about how bad it was. And I don't think either of us has kind of like given now, like, okay, I went through this, but what are the good things I kind of, because for me, personally, I'm very self-sufficient. You know, I can do so many things on my own. Sometimes I'll come across content and someone's like, yeah, I learned. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? Like, I can wash, I can... Oh, now that I'm thinking of it, I'm like, but yeah, I'm very self-sufficient as a person. And I think even though it kind of gives you split personalities, at the end of the day, there's this firm affirmation of like, oh, I am epi, and there's nothing you can do or say. And no, for me, it was the positive aspect of resilience. It's like, I will bounce back, you know, irregardless of the situations I'm in. And I learned to make the best out of every situation. So for you, what do you think was, in the education, of course, it was amazing.
You know, I will still have to disagree with you and say I will not mention the positive.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe it's also because of how I think of boarding schools. I really think of boarding schools as colonial legacies. So asking me to say something positive...
we're going to unpack that. Do not even get there yet.
But point is, if you ask me to say the positive aspects of boarding school, to me, it's almost asking me, can I mention positive aspects of
prison
being colonized? I will not. I don't have them. I think that the only thing that comes out is learning survival mechanisms. But if this thing in itself had not existed, I wouldn't have had to essentially go through it. So I don't think I want to go into like this is positive or whatever. The only thing I can say or can really give is justification as to why people end up in boarding schools. I feel like maybe those justifications can sound positive, but they will still be grounded in survival mechanisms.
Yes, coping. Oh my, no, what? Actually, that is such a fresh take for me. Actually, the funniest part is you equating boarding school to a colonial structure. But that's such a unique take. Like, you just justify the reasons. Now, Sonia, I need you to really expound on this. There's a video I have of you on TikTok, and I think that's why I was like, this is the right person for this episode. And you had the craziest take. At first, it was you equated how boarding schools, I think, essentially are like prison structures.
Yes.
And I'm like, what? I didn't even think I would see those two words. Are they even grammatically supposed to be put together? And I'm like, you know what? Let me listen. And I'm not even joking. I was really mind blown by your text, because it's like, you talked about how the structures are. Of course, you talked about the uniforms, and you talk about the building structures, how they have these high walls. And then at the end, I think you talked about them also being like colonial legacies. Now, Sonia, take me through that, please.
Okay.
Yeah, once again.
Yeah.
Take us through that.
I don't think I'll remember exactly the things that I've said, because I feel like it was also coming from like me doing research and then coming like, this is the research that I found, so I can only say things that come from my memory. But I feel like one of the reasons that I say that boarding schools are colonial legacies is also, I think one of the places I draw a lot from is Kenya. I think Kenya in itself is probably the largest example of that. I think that Kenyan boarding schools take it up a notch when it comes to like, oh, this place is like very like militarized. I remember one of the things that one of my friends mentioned to me is movement by running. They were not allowed to walk.
Actually, they used to say, you walk how you think. So you need to move.
And they were absolutely punished for walking. You had to run everywhere. And also the other thing that I remember when I was looking into this in relation to Kenya is a lot of like former British concentration camps ended up becoming boarding schools.
Yeah.
And you'd have to think of how the structure of a concentration camp becomes a boarding school. You cannot erase that. You cannot erase how the place looks, how the people will experience it, because somebody who builds a concentration camp has a goal of how to make somebody feel.
Yes.
You turning it into a school does not remove its structure in itself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that when I look at how boarding schools are structured, even if like, yes, the purpose in itself now is like for a school, they're not really structured any different than if I go to Kenya and I look at a boarding school there, even though I've really looked at it through images, I haven't been to the boarding schools themselves, they don't look that different from the ones that we see here. But there is so many things for me that make me affirm 100% that it's a colonial legacy. Again, especially through how I think of boarding schools as prison structures. I think I've given so many examples in the TikTok. I was talking about uniforms. I was talking about
building structures,
that, but also surveillance. You're constantly being surveilled in a sense that like, I need to be here at this time, at that time, and if I'm not here at this time, I will be punished. I have a certain schedule that is made for me. I also have absolutely no authority over my life in any manner. And I understand that, like, yes, even as kids who are minors, it kind of makes sense that we do not really have a lot of authority and a lot of it is controlled by our parents. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of freedom that somebody should have at that age.
Autonomy, but we are individual autonomy.
But we're under full control and authority. We are just under the authority figures and they make every single decision for us. And you have no say whatsoever in what happens to you. And so to me, I'm like, how is that really different from someone who is being colonized?
Oh my days.
I don't know, but like prisons in relation to like, I think anything related to colonization, I really do think that the two come together. And I think that boarding schools in themselves are a good representation of a colonial legacy.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if I remember the title properly, Mahmoud Mabdani. I think there's this book I was reading, I think it's Define and Rule. And he was basically kind of deconstructing what the ideology meant in the sense of like, that was also sort of like some way of colonialists administering, you know, their control of African countries. So when the other thing is failed, they kind of did that where it was, I'm losing my train of thought and why I say this, but it was more of like, I think for you, I define for you, you know, there were rules and then there was, the hierarchy was pretty much evident. And it's like, I don't care if you have billion-dollar dreams and ideologies, whatever I say passes. You know, so they kind of defined us as recipients and them they're, you know, the rulers. But that is such an insane tech, which helps us dive into the next segment of hot techs. So you've really given us some really hot techs in this, but I want like 3-liners of your like pretty much hottest tech on like boarding school.
Ooh,
like for example, you can, for me, it's maybe corporal punishments I think should be banned, because why am I cleaning a roof because I missed a bell? Like, is it that deep, you know? Or publicly wagged. I remember they had this system of like publicly wagging you. They're like, 100 canes for, actually it was, if you got like a 50, you're caned 50 for the max close to 100. So, and I'm like, really? Is that necessary? So for you, what's your hot take on?
My hot take will be contradictory as well, because I was saying like earlier, if you asked me, I would say just abolish boarding schools as a whole. I don't think they should be there. I don't think they should exist in any manner, in any form. The same way I don't think prisons should exist either. But
what?
I don't think so. Don't think so. I don't think that people...
so where should the pedophiles stay? Should there be a capital punishment?
Now that's why I was saying it will sound contradictory, because even I myself know that I do have like...
You're a beneficiary of prison.
That in a way, but I'm also like, there is something about, I think, any prison structure being centered around punishment. People don't learn from being punished. I think that is something
restorative. Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like if I was to say how I think about boarding schools, and especially because I think I do believe in restorative justice, I do have some regards to it, especially when it comes to like assault and everything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I find myself often like thinking, I guess what kind of happens when somebody is punished. The only thing that ends up, I think, coming out of punishment most times is repetition of the same thing that they're punished for.
Repetition?
Like, repetition of like the same. I'm forgetting. There's a term for it, but I don't remember it. But essentially,
deterrence? I don't know.
I know. All I'm saying is a lot of time when somebody is punished for a crime and they get out, they most likely will come back in for the same crime. There's been a lot of research that has been done around that.
I see.
But my problem, I think, with again, like solving the problem of why we need boarding schools is also centered around like poverty. I think that at times one of the things that boarding schools have helped a lot of families in really comes around income. Essentially, the amount of money that they spend, I think, on taking a child to boarding school actually saves them in a lot of ways economically because they will no longer have the same responsibilities of feeding and taking care of the children because most of them do not have the financial means.
Yes.
And so putting a child in boarding school can sometimes also be a financial decision. But at the same time, I cannot...
Like you said, you just have justifications.
Yes, you see?
Yeah.
But I'm also like, that thing in itself that's existing, the poverty, is a failure of the system in itself. Like people being poor is the system failing the people. And so people find ways to adapt to that. And I think boarding schools now come in to help resolve that problem.
Yeah.
But they're creating a multitude of problems in the long run because now what is really happening is a parent is essentially giving full responsibility to somebody else
to raise
their child. But you cannot put, I don't know, if you really think about it, say per dorm, you maybe had 2-3 matrons. How are they supposed to follow up with a child's upbringing? There's 300, 400 people. There's a lot of neglect, I think, that ends up happening. And even that neglect in itself now is really the parent has abandoned the child and has left them in a care of someone most likely who doesn't care a lot, like at all about the child themselves.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand why that decision happens. That's why I was like,
if you're like 50-50 contradiction. And I think you're so right. I think actually that's the biggest. It's the neglect because you're letting, apart from the authority, it's also you're letting other people's children, you don't know their background. I think that's where the peer pressure comes in. And then you're picking up on so many habits because I'm 2 weeks at home and then I spend half of my life at school. So yeah, you're so right. Like, you're really letting another person. And I think that's the worst thing you can do. I don't know. Is it the worst? I don't know. But so your hot take is very radical. It's abolish. And boarding schools are like
the contradiction themselves.
Okay, so we are about, unfortunately, to come to the end of our segment. And are we? Yeah. Time. So I think these ones we can have very short answers.
Yeah.
Very short. What's the most boarding school thing about you that still exists today? You wake up shivering at 4 a.m. You're like, oh my God. Or you hear an imaginary bell.
I think, to me, it would be how I deal with things emotionally. I am still finding myself a lot of times dealing with anything by just being numb. And that's something I'm still trying to unlearn to this day, but it started from there.
Oof.
Yeah.
Heavy stuff.
Yep.
And then, so another thing is, do you think we all experienced boarding school the same way? Because you're coming from, your experience is not my experience. You'll find someone and they're like, what? I had the time of my life. And what factors do you think played into this being like different experiences, yet we're all under the same authority, having the same circles,
So many. I think boarding school can be an escape for people in abusive households. So they could literally feel like this is the escape, this is the only place where they actually feel a little safer. 2, class differences make a huge difference in how to experience boarding school. We know absolutely that people that come from wealthier families also usually had a lot more benefits.
Privilege.
There is privileges that were fully created for them. Well, I mean, a simple example I can give is I remember kids being able to, like, say, access different types of food, even though it was illegal, in like the offices of nuns, and they were allowed to go there and have
pocket money. Yeah.
But there is absolutely bribery that happens within boarding school and within the authorities with parents. So class can absolutely make a difference as well.
Loops in the system. And I think even another point maybe we can even make on that is what is going on? Did I take my... I have forgotten the point I was going to make. But okay. I think
one more thing I could add is illnesses. Like people essentially coming in with different conditions within the space are not always, they're going to have a very different experience because, again, a lot of boarding schools do not have the healthcare structures to essentially take into account people, say, who have disabilities. How are they going to experience the space versus people?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So that makes a huge difference.
Oh, okay. So the thing I was going to say was colorism too. Do you think it plays? Because I don't know.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
Because I remember, I need to catch my train of thought because I remember I cracked the code. I don't know if I can call it finding a loop in the system. And I remember how we would have these Pakistani kids who were told to maintain their hair and we couldn't. And then I remember when a South African history class, and this teacher kept referring to me as, there was the Zulu, the Khoi, and then the sun. And then I think he would say the sun, and he's like the epis that are like the sun. And then, anyways, there were so many things that would feed me mentally. And I realized there was a time I remember we were on a line to get whooped, and I realized I'm very close to, it's very controversial. I'm sorry, I didn't set the system up. And they were like, you're brown. You can just say... you have a low resistance to...
Yes.
What do you think of that?
I feel like that, again, to me, that's why I'm always like, you can really not escape racism, even within spaces where I'm like, even the colorism, it's almost like looking at a black body and feeling like a black body is supposed to be able to endure pain. Yes. And if I was to look at it even historically, there is absolutely ways that like dark-skinned people have been like, in any healthcare space, but that also again expands to boarding schools. Just like, like you can survive, you can endure, like you're made for this.
Insane. Has that happened to you?
To me, I was on the privileged side of things, so I don't think that I would say it was happening to me. But I also know how like being dark skinned can absolutely change your experience. Yeah. But also even in how people talked about beauty, it was absolutely made obvious. One of the things that I remember was like when I think I was in my second year. People had categories and they would be like, this person belongs in this first category, second, and those categories were categories of beauty. And you have to understand that people who are doing this are 13-year-olds.
Yes.
So yes, that also absolutely changes how you experience the space. If you're essentially made to say, you're in the fourth category, you're the ugliest. And people would affirm and say that to you. And I feel like that is
detrimental to your self-esteem. Oh my days. Okay, so now I think we've had a lot of sharing experiences. Now to wrap this up, it's the second last thing. I think the other one will be for our audience is that if you were to redesign the boarding school experience today, what would you keep and also what would you change about it? Because now that you've lived there, there's no other person that knows what's best for the other person, or what would you redesign? Because for me, I feel like a lot, I would change so much. For example, you know how they used to give us holiday work? I think they should have instead given us like psychological evaluations of like, how were we feeling about the environment we were in? Did we feel, I don't know, like it's always test me academically, but how? Maybe because I remember there was a time I think, psychologically being bullied and I didn't notice, and it was affecting my grades at the time, but I didn't notice. It was like, you're weak, like why can't you just chin up? And I realized no one cared to ask. When you go home, they're just like, where's the report card? Instead of
what's going on.
What's going on? And I think for me, when it comes to that, I have a lot of recommendations, but first share with me
a couple.
Yeah.
Age. Age is a huge one for me.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody who's under the age of 16 should be in a boarding school. I just don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is developed enough to be away from their parents.
Yeah.
Again, controversial because it does say people who are in abusive households, but that's one. I think the second one would be, I think how parents are involved. I think once you place like your child in a boarding school, it's almost like the school also has a lot of authority over parents.
Yeah.
Parents cannot pick you up when you're sick. They cannot really visit you as they please. They have a lot less access to you as their child, yet you do belong to them. So I think that access that parents have is probably a huge one for me, especially given that kids die in boarding schools too.
Yes,
from
I have heard.
all of that. I don't know, so many takes, because again, I feel like it's a hard question for me to answer when I feel like I still lean towards this thing not existing at all, but I still see it as a survival mechanism. So it's hard. It's hard, but I do think that it can at least be restructured in a couple ways to not make it as bad as it is now.
Yeah. And I think for me, it can also boil down to us having a hybrid system, because I'm not going to lie, now when I reflect even on this conversation we are having, boarding school made me so tolerant to so many, like tolerant to like diversity in, if it was in terms of ideas, if it was in terms of ethnicity, because I remember I was going to school with South Sudanese. Like so I learned to understand people's cultures and also mine, and also appreciate that we can both coexist in an environment. And then, and I think also another thing is that maybe boarding school afforded us was, there were, anyways, no distractions and stuff. So anyways, I can say we can have a hybrid system.
What do you mean by hybrid?
Hybrid, I feel like this was something I was roughly I'm like, okay, I can spend 2 weeks in this boarding school, and then maybe the other 2, a term in boarding, I don't know, like there has to be a middle ground, because I feel like it's either boarding or it's day or it's homeschooling. I feel like you have to have like kind of like a variety of all this for you to have like a rich kind of like life and experience. Yeah. And I think also, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, the audience, you know how RGB has this for like churches overlooking, like, do you have these papers? Like, I feel like it should do the same in terms of like now the well-being, social well-being of these children, not just check the curriculum. We are setting a curriculum of like, it's TVET. It's, I think there also has to be that government body that oversees the general well-being of children in schools, And then also I feel like there has to be a mandatory ethical course for teachers before they become students. I feel like now the application is like, okay, you have your bachelor's and master's in education, but like that, I don't know, maybe psychological effect. I think for me, all the teachers I remember that had a great impact on me, it wasn't the information, it was how they treated me.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's like once that environment, that safe space was built for me, and then I would understand. If I knew I'm not going to get whooped the moment I show that I don't understand something. So when they created that space, safe space for me, I think I also was recipient of whatever knowledge they were, bestowing onto me.
And I feel like that's the other thing it's making me think of is also having a space to report. Because I do feel like I cannot count the amount of times teachers were absolutely inappropriate.
Yeah.
And I feel like, again, having no power, no authority kind of place you in a position where you may be in a position that is very vulnerable. And I'm like, you as a teacher should not be here. But because you don't really have even a space to report these cases, if you know about them, again, easily another thing that could really be there that's not even there now is sex education. Because you still don't know what is really happening to you. You can only feel, this thing is wrong, but I don't know why it is. And that really comes from like not even having enough education on this. But I do think that those two things coexisting would be important. Actually,
even something I thought of is independent therapists. I feel like that can also really help. And then also, actually, for an ethical course, I feel like there has to be a psychological evaluation of these teachers.
Yeah.
I think, for me. And I remember, what you said.
A background check.
A background check, exactly. And I remember they used to bring that system of feedback from students. It had a suggestion box, but it was very informal. We used it for, Sonia is a very bad girl. It was, I think there has to be serious feedback mechanisms.
Yeah. Another recommendation that I was going to have is more in relation to parents and how they handle essentially how they deal with like neglecting with their kids. I think that, yes, there's a lot of things to critique about authority figures and how they end up influencing how the kids experience the space. But I also think that there is a lot of accountability that parents don't take in the lives that the kids are experiencing. One example that I could give is how authority figures sometimes have a lot of say on the kids' like health situations, where they're like, oh, like your kid is not going to go home because they're not sick enough. But I'm also like, I think as a parent, legally the kid belongs to you. You should always have more say. If you are saying, hey, I think I get to decide if my kid should be out of here and get taken to a hospital instead of being in your care, I think that parents need to speak up more. 2, if there is rules that are being implemented by the school that kind of don't align with what most parents are thinking, parents should absolutely have associations where they get to discuss these matters and these problems and say, hey, you've put up these policies, we don't agree to them. It's not just a matter of they've put up the policy and you assume that they know best. You know best what your child needs.
That apart, yes, I think stronger parent associations and them owning also their role, apart from, sorry to say, just paying the school fees or what is on the menu. There is more, I think, to our child's well-being, more than food and,
place, a bed and everything.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's such a very good point, Sonia. I think to like end this very wholesome conversation, I think for our listeners, maybe one key thing we can leave you to like ponder and reflect on is, if actually, even for you, for anyone that went through boarding school, if you removed boarding school from your life entirely, would you still be the same person? Actually, this was for you, Sonia.
Okay.
Would you still be the same person?
No. I think that as people, we are the culmination of our experiences. And so those experiences have really, if they've been there for so long, they have definitely played a role into the person that we become. So for me, yes, if it wasn't there, I think I'd be a completely different person.
So one question, Sonia, we can also ask our audience is, if everyone survived it, that's what the parents say, but you're fine. You look at you, you're thriving. Does it make it healthy? Yeah. So thank you so much, Sonia. I think this conversation was so insightful and very candid and very honest. I think I'm going to look back and wonder why I overshared, but thankfully
we all did a little bit. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for even agreeing, to walk us through experiences. And also, I really, really loved your text, genuinely. And these are things I'm going to even think of yet again when I watch this. So thank you so much for honoring our invitation.
Thank you for having me. This was also fruitful. It was a fruitful conversation for me as well.
Okay, so please, our dear listeners, do not forget to subscribe. And when this airs, please feel free to share with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. This is Ejitecherezo podcast, where youth turn conversation into civic action. From studios to your communities to the policies that shape our future. We break down complex topics and open dialogues that inform, reflect, and influence decisions. Ejitecherezo podcast, voices into action, ideas into change.